Okay, welcome to 1000 Ways to be a Champion for Children. My name is Alan Friesen. This show is all about learning ways that we can prevent adverse childhood experiences and also creating awareness about adverse childhood experiences so that if you are an adult survivor of childhood trauma, we encourage you to address that, solve that, find a way to go beyond that to enjoy your best life. And then we want to create kind of a template for caring adults to go out and make a difference in a kiddo's life who would you will underestimate how important that is. Now, today, like, I'm a champion for children, I like to say, but I have Chief Lusner, who's probably heading up, I think, the police department that is the most progressive in reducing adverse childhood experiences and being very trauma informed. Chief Lusner, thank you so much for joining me. I got to say, I was really impressed with what I learned about what you did, and I want you to share that with our viewers about what you and your officers have happening.
Sure. No, thanks for having me, Alan. I appreciate it. The journey for me to become involved in this work started in 2016 when I got involved with a grant in all places of public health. And that changed my whole perspective on policing once I got involved in that grant. So to kind of just share with you, my, process of how I came to believe that reducing the impact of adverse childhood experiences and building connections with kids is smack dab in the middle of the lane of public safety. I start with when I first was promoted to chief, October 1st, 2009. I was a firm believer in community problem-oriented policing, and that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I think that even by people that use it sometimes don't fully understand it. So community problem-oriented policing says that you engage partners in the community, real partnership, to get at the root cause of crime and social disorder. It's not a unit, it's not a policy, it's not a program, it's a philosophy. And I've been fortunate enough to attend, various schools here and abroad, the FBI National Academy, the College of Policing, the United Kingdom, and the definition is the same. What I just told you, some words change. And I look to departments in my state and across the country that we're partnering with the community to get at the root cause. So we instituted a number of things during my tenure as chief, those first few years. We were connecting people with substance abuse treatment services. We put a trained social worker and drug counselor in our municipal court. That's where traffic tickets, minor shoplifting, there was really no stop and reflection. Why is this person coming in contact with the criminal justice system? How can we prevent it in the future? It was all about, let's make a deal. Let's move the case. Let's make a deal. We partnered with mental health folks to connect people with mental health services, housing services, and dealing with the homeless. We did a lot of work that I'm proud of, and we still continue to this day. And those programs are important. They will continue, because I believe when you talk about community problem-oriented policing, I have three categories that I focus on. One is enforcement, is the traditional approach of police. It's always going to play an important role. But then intervention efforts. How do we have interventions for people that we come in contact with to try to prevent them from coming in contact with us again? And then education and prevention. So those are the three buckets that I look at under community problem-oriented policing. So I come to this grant in 2016. I had spoke at our local Chamber of Commerce about some of the programs I just mentioned. And the hospital came up to me and said, look, we're applying for a grant for building a culture of health in the county. It's through New Jersey Health Initiatives and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. That's Johnson & Johnson, one of the largest, pharmaceutical companies in the world, based here in New Jersey. Robert Wood Johnson has a foundation, one of the largest in the world. And said, we're going to apply for this grant, and we'd like you to come in and just talk about some of the things that you're doing, connecting people with services, basically in the intervention category. So I went and I did that. There was a superintendent of schools. There was the CEO of the largest provider of mental health services for the county there. And I just went and I just talked about the things we were doing. And I thought that was the end of it. So I get a call from the vice president and says, look, congratulations, we got the grant. You now need to go to Princeton for 2 days. And then after that, you need to go back to Princeton again for 2 more days. I said, whoa, what are we talking about here? I just was sharing some of the things. I don't know if I can make that work within my schedule. And they said, well, it's contingent upon the grant. You have to have training from the Center for Creative Leadership. You'll be there with some other coalitions, public health coalitions in the state that receive money. It was $50,000 a year for 4 years, so a total of $200,000. And I was this close to not doing it, saying, look, I don't have the time, commitment to do it, but I did it.
Well, you got all the pressure of enforcement is a big thing that most chiefs, that's what focuses all of their time and energy, is just the enforcement aspect, right? I mean, to you to go to, these other 2 steps kind of a thing where, those are kind of normally probably get pushed aside. But so you're busy, you're saying, I'm not sure I should do this. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, no, that's fine. You bring up a good point. Like the intervention, I always believed that was a smart investment. I still believe it's a smart investment.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got involved in this grant, I realized I have to go upstream if I'm really going to make an impact. So, Cole, I'm sorry, it's my 8-year-old in the back. Cole, I'm on the Zoom. Cole, can you please?
Hey, Cole, how you doing?
Sorry about that.
That's good. That's all right.
So, intervention is important because it does have a return on investment, a significant return. And I think we need to think like that in law enforcement, not just the enforcement where you talked about. So I go to this, training in Princeton, and our coalition was really unique. The superintendent of schools committed. He went for 2 days. The CEO, large provider of mental health services, was there for 2 days. The vice president of the hospital, the president of the Chamber of Commerce for Cape May County. The Cape May County is a big seasonal community, a lot of beach communities, represents a lot of businesses, one of the most powerful Chamber of Commerces in the state. So she came, and then we had a coach who was a board member for the hospital. And we went through training about how to think about tackling that question of building a culture of health in Cape May County. And it was so valuable to be sitting in that room, not only with the other people across the state in the public health field, but then also my fellow coalition members in education and mental health, and the conversations and the interaction and the cross-sector collaboration that we weren't doing, quite frankly, that we really need to do as a community. And we were told, go through the training for 4 days, then go back to your community and start to develop a blueprint to submit how you're going to spend this money. So I went in thinking about the opiate epidemic. That was where I was focused on. I said, you know what? This is where I think we should spend the money. But as we went through the training, we came back and we started to talk about all of our issues. We came across the adverse childhood experiences study. And I tell you, a light bulb went off in all of our, when we learned about that. I first saw the film Resilience. I got to hear Dr. Larry Bentros speak. And I was blown away. And everybody was like, you know what? This touches all of us. This is the root cause. And for me, I'm thinking, all right, community problem-oriented policing, this is the root cause. Those other things are important. When I'm connecting somebody with substance abuse treatment, that's important, but I'm really not attacking the root cause. I need to be attacking the root cause. And I said, adverse childhood experience and reducing the impact of trauma and building resiliency in kids should be my #1 priority. So we started to build a blueprint to spend our money on reducing the impact of adverse childhood experiences. We collected data on juvenile arrest rates, suspension rates, admissions and counseling, the data we had for mental health, and we started to build a blueprint. So from a law enforcement perspective, I wasn't exactly sure. I knew this was the root cause, but what do I do about it as a police chief? How do I go about it? So I met a guy by the name of Mike McKnight. Mike McKnight has written 2 books with a co-author named Dr. Lori Desautels from Butler University. She runs their applied educational neuroscience unit. And I got to know Mike. He's from Cape May County. And I got to see Lori speak because part of the money in our grant was building resiliency teams in our schools and getting this information and trauma-informed information into our schools. So I was able to attend some trainings and meet Lori and Mike. And I started to see really quickly, there are things that we can do. So the first thing that I did was I created a trauma responsive policing policy. I took information from the International Association of Chiefs of Police and work they did with the Yale Childhood Development Center on how police officers, when we respond to calls for service, can handle those calls in a way to reduce the impact of that traumatic event. Police officers are on the front lines when a lot of these traumatic events happen. So things such as not making an arrest in front of a parent when reasonably possible. It's not always possible, but lots of times it is. Not using a child as a interpreter when there's a language barrier. Getting down at eye level and talking with a child. It makes a big difference. Regulating and how to co-regulate a child, giving them some tools, having them drink a sip of water or suck on a piece of candy. Those are some suggestions that Dr. Desatel had given us. Redirect their thoughts and have them draw or talk about their sports game or video games. Strategies to kind of redirect their thoughts and have a positive interaction with that kid or get them thinking, differently on scene. SWAT operations. How do we handle SWAT operations? I was a SWAT commander for 10 years. Nobody ever trained me about the impact that was happening when we went through a door to arrest someone and children were present. It was all about security, making sure the officers were safe and that we did it in a safe way and minimize risk to all parties involved. But nobody talked to me about the kids, right? What's our plan for the kids when we do these operations? Give consideration to that. Death notifications to kids. When families have someone that passes, how can we assist families with that? Follow-up visits, really important. If they're done in the right way, can communicate safety to a child, right? Police officers, and I know there's, different things happening in our country, and I'm sure in, other places about the police and trust and things along those lines. And I think this helps build trust with the police. And I understand we have some barriers we have to overcome there, but, police officers trained correctly and, in the right circumstances, we can communicate safety, which is one of the most important things we know when it comes to adverse childhood experiences that we want kids to feel.
And that's part of the follow-up. That's part of the follow-up visit type thing, is to kind of reinforce to the child that the officers are here to help to keep themselves safe, that kind of a thing. Correct? Is that?
Yeah, it's a caring thing too. So,
yeah, sure.
We do that with our school resource officer through our Handle a Care program, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We try to do it inadvertently without the child knowing. The school resource officer will have a high five in the hallway, have lunch with the kid. We see a kid playing basketball. We'll get out of the car. Hey, how's it going? How you doing? Try to have some positive interaction in the days following a dramatic event. And just give you an idea of the power of that. And I can give you a lot of examples, but one that when I first announced this policy, I was talking to a chief in another jurisdiction, and I was telling him about the policy, and I was excited about and how I think it can make a difference. And I was telling him about the follow-up visits, because the Yale work talks about the power of that in the toolkit that I looked at. And he said, you know what? It's funny because, I was on the road because I went to a domestic, and he was telling me a call about, 10 years earlier before he was chief. And it was a domestic violence case. And he talked to the kid and had some real positive interactions, and he could tell there was a connection there. And he said, I'm going to stop by and see you next week. And the kid was, really excited. And the officer left, and some things happened, and he forgot to go back. And when he went back for a domestic, and that kid came running out of the house, and you said you were going to come talk to me. You said you were going to stop and see me, and you didn't. And he felt terrible about it, and he didn't realize how much it meant. And I know you and I were talking a little bit before the show, the power that we have as adults in kids' lives, whether it be a police officer, a teacher, a boss, for someone with their first job, or a coach. You don't realize, especially for a kid that comes from challenging circumstances and maybe doesn't have a lot of positive interactions with adults, they're really craving that, and they remember it. They might not remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel, right? And that really makes a difference. I mean, that's planting seeds in children, in my opinion. So that follow-up visit was part of it. So, as I was thinking about what can I do, I have that policy that we do, how we reduce the impact, how about some follow-up visits. Then the next thing we did is we instituted a Handle with Care program, which
I love this program. This blew my mind when I heard about it. Carry on. It's amazing.
Yeah. So look, I can't take credit for it. West Virginia did a great job, but we copied it. And basically the Handle with Care program is simply a one-page notice that says the name of the child, the date, and the officer's name, Handle with Care. No other information. In a lot of cases, under existing law, whatever we can communicate, we communicate, which isn't a lot. Just handle this child with care. Because our typical communication before this program was if a child was arrested or a child, somehow was going to impact the safety or efficiency of the school the next day. They would say there was a fight over the weekend, it was going to spill into the school, or weapons or drugs or something. We would tell the school. But we did not tell the school that we were at a domestic last night and 2 kids were present. Maybe a minor arrest, simple assault. Maybe there was no arrest at all, but 2 police officers were in the home for a 911 call and children were present. We wouldn't communicate that to the school. It's a dramatic experience, right? And the kids are going to go to school the next day. They walk through those doors and the teachers have no idea and the principals have no idea. So there was an arrest for a warrant arrest or a DWI or an overdose or, a car accident where somebody went to the hospital. I mean, I can go on and on, all these cases. So that goes to the school the following day before the bell rings. So the school has that information so they don't compound the trauma the next day. Kid didn't do their homework, or there's a behavioral issue, or they're going to look at that child through a completely different lens because they have that information. So that was the second thing that we did. And those were the two programs that were really important. And before we did those programs, this is an important piece. We delivered training to our officers. As the chief, I delivered a PowerPoint that I developed with the help of Dr. Desitel and Mike McKnight. Every officer saw the film Resilience, the Biology of Stress, and the Signs of Hope. And then I went over these 2 policies. I said, these go into effect September 1st, 2018. So it was July of 18. I did the training, and then these policies went into effect. And the whole goal of the training for me was to change the mindset, and I have it in the slide, to change your mindset from when we come in contact with a kid, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened with you or what happened to you. And when you look at it through that lens, you're going to see so many other opportunities. That doesn't mean that we're not going to make arrests when we got to make arrests. And if there's, a violation of the law or a violent crime or somebody else gets hurt, yeah, we're going to take action. But we still got to understand why, how did that happen, right? And when you look at it through that lens, especially when you're dealing with a lot of, minor offenses or no offense at all, but you got called and now you have contact with a kid, you see so many other different options, and it changes your whole perspective, in my opinion. Now, getting that shift when we did the training, I'm not going to say it was the most easiest thing, but we got there. And I'll tell you the one thing where we got there is to talk about the trauma that police officers see. I lost an officer to suicide in 2012. More police officers are killing themselves every year than the year before. It's a crisis in our profession. Adding to substance abuse and all the other poor social outcomes that we have going on. And I said to the officers, think about it. They all know officers that have struggled with the trauma they've seen. Think about the trauma you've seen. I've seen some terrible things. I know my officers have, and I don't know any other way to say it. Just kind of lives inside of you. I remember being 21 years old and the radio playing on a car accident of an 18-year-old kid, thinking, man, that kid was listening to that song and now he's gone. How does that happen? Like that. It just happens. And I can give you more and more stories, but I said, now think about how we struggled, or we know people that have struggled with it, and our brains are fully developed. We have the support of a department or family or friends. Now think about an 8 or a 10-year-old child, because the research we see when they have repeated exposure to toxic stress, what's happening in the mind and bodies of kids. I mean, it's similar to what's happening to soldiers in combat, right? So, I mean, think about that. And I tell you, I think a light bulb went off, and that's something in our profession, and we're tackling it here in New Jersey with the resiliency program for officers. To ask officers to be trauma informed in the community, we've got to give them the tools and training to be trauma informed with themselves. To make sure that they're regulated and they're balanced, and we prepare them from what they're going to see, because we're a decent sized department for New Jersey. We're not a major city, but I can tell you, every night I read the report from the shift before. It's all negative. It's domestics, it's child custody disputes, it's we had 2 stabbings within the last week. Attempted suicide by cop. You add up all this is just within the last couple of days. And then they go to bed and they come back the night before, and it's mostly negative interactions with other human beings. And then week after week, month after month, they deal with that and the impact that has on them. And then add in, the serious, cases of trauma or children hurt or families crushed and devastated. It has an impact on the officers, and we need to prepare them to manage that and handle that. And that connection, I think, is really important to get that cultural shift that you need to have, so they can go in the community and have those impact with kids and have those connections. There's a Dr. Kate Tumulty Felice. I don't know if you've bumped up against her at all. I know you're big in this field. She's been collecting data about the connection between trauma the police see and kids see, and then poor social and health outcomes. And the stuff she showed me is like, wow, it's very, very, you can see the correlation. So that training for me is a big piece.
Can I just interject one thing?
Yep.
Yeah, I get it entirely, where, police officers, any emergency people, nurses, doctors, they have to have, or they experience things that people like me never have to experience, right? And so their self-care, their ability to regulate, their ability to keep themselves well, huge important. What do you do? What keeps you at your best, Chris? How do you manage all of those things that you see every day?
Sure. So a couple things. And I think, it's different for everybody. And that's where I think, giving people tools and that awareness to understand what works for me may not work for another person. But I will tell you one thing that I think everyone can benefit from is breathing exercises. Different forms of meditation, I think, are important. For me, walking in nature. I've been trying to do that. I have a park by my office. In the middle of the day, I'll even if it's just 15 minutes, where I'll just walk. And sometimes I got to take a call or whatever, but I try to just go and walk. And get in, connect with nature. And for me, that kind of has a soothing effect. Exercise, I don't do as much as I should, but my wife and I walk a lot. So we've been trying to do more of that. Spending time with my family and be present. Sometimes I get so caught up in everything else it has to do. I try to force myself to be more present. And that, I think, is something that I've been learning. And the one thing that I've learned the last couple of years, it's been helpful, and I learned it in the resiliency training in New Jersey, is to catch myself from not spiraling down and recognize when that's kind of building and happening. And
you have the self-awareness to say, oh, wait a second, I can see something happening here. That kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Listening to my body, right? I can feel, maybe getting overwhelmed and how I look at things. And the thing that was really helpful for me in the resiliency training, they talked about negative bias, how all human beings we're ingrained with negative bias because that's what kept us alive. We scan the area for threats, right? And to make sure that we stay alive and we avoid, all the things through, evolution. I thought, wow, because we're around negativity as police officers all the time. then we have, we're prone to negative bias, to just have that awareness and then realize, okay, look, I could spiral down here. I'm going to do something. I'm going to try to break that chain and let myself spiral up. So, that's something I just learned from that training from here in New Jersey we've been doing with officers. So, and look, I'm not always successful at it. Sometimes I get, I have a bad day and it's like, oh man, I feel down like everybody. I try to recognize what is happening and try to get out of it.
It's a human reality. It's a human experience, right? That happens, right? For everybody. So just even about mental health in general, right? It's so important that people ask for help as well too, right? There's a lot, especially guys, who they won't ask for help. And that's to their detriment and to our detriment, that people who don't need help don't go and ask. Don't just say, hey, I can use a hand with this because I don't know what to do next, right? So
and that's really challenging in our profession. So I say asking for help is a show of strength, not weakness. And then in the police profession, where we're called upon and viewed as we're going to come in and solve everyone else's problems, we're going to be the ones that are going to bring calm to a chaotic situation. We're going to deal with a dangerous situation and keep everybody safe. For someone who steps into that role to then say, I need help, is a challenge. And we have to make sure that we don't stigmatize those folks. And as chiefs, that, officers come forward and ask for help, that we get them the help, and then we don't take their gun, you're not strong enough to do this job, fitness for duty, all the other things that go along with that. So, there's a lot of pieces here within the puzzle to get where you want to go,
Yes. So the officers, you did the training for the officers, and I love the empathy that you brought in to say, hey, how about you think about how you deal with things, and now you think about 8-year-old kid who doesn't have the development and the maturity to be able to handle this and doesn't have the supports. Like, how are they going to handle this, right? So love that, where you kind of introduce that empathy. And how did your officers? Did they embrace it? Did they say, yeah, we're in 100%?
Yeah, they did embrace it. Yep. And I think part of it is, I think you have to get to their why, right? Why did they get into the job in the first place? Show them why this is going to make a difference in other people's lives, why this is going to make the community safer. And we did get buy-in. So that first year with Handle with Care, I wasn't sure how many referrals we would get, but we had 116 referrals within the first year. So think about, the school year is what, 32 weeks? So, we were having, 2, 3, 4 referrals a week, where a kid walking through those doors, the school now has that awareness. We took our school resource officer with that follow-up visit. He has lunch with a different group of kids in the elementary schools. So we're talking kindergarten to 5th grade. And we would mix kids in without them knowing. If they had a Handle with Care referral, well, you know what, this week they got to get in and have lunch with Officer Julio. And Officer Julio, high five, talk to him. He's so good with the kids. And that's a whole nother discussion about cops in schools. I got to have the right cop, but it's such an opportunity to have an impact positively on kids' lives, keep them safe at the same time. And, he's so good with the kids. So, yeah, the officers did buy into it. I was talking to an officer the other day. He went to a call, and there was a young child, I think it was maybe 5 or 6, who said, and because everything going on with police, are you going to kill my grandmother because the officer showed up for a call? He goes, I got down at eye level, Chief. I said, no, absolutely not. You're safe. He was doing some of the things that we talked about, to try to communicate, safety. And he was telling me about it. Now, I've also made it a priority. Look, when I make promotions, when I make assignments, people that buy into the mission of the department, those people are going to be rewarded. And I think if you're going to institute change, and this is change, there's no question about it. Not a lot of people like change, right? Commissioner Ramsey from Philadelphia, who, I've had the opportunity to talk to a few times. I was president of the New Jersey State Association of Chiefs of Police, representing over 400 chiefs. So I've had the opportunity to meet him and talk to him a few times. He told me there's 2 things cops hate: the way things are and change. So, when you're going to change something, you got to realize what you're up against, and you got to have a plan to make sure it's sustainable. So, but the officers, I believe they did buy in for, the reasons I just said. Now, that's only the first half there, right? I mean, that is the reduce the dose of trauma. If you hear Dr. Nadine Burke talk, I've had the opportunity to talk to her about the work that we've done. She talks about reducing the dose of trauma in her field and the work that she wants to see. That's how I viewed it with the calls for service, and then partnering with the schools to reduce the dose. The next piece is the building resiliency. Like I remember saying to Mike McKnight and Dr. Desatel, like, well, what do we do about this? Like, how do we fix it? How do we make it better? And they said, connections with trusted adults. Connections. They said, you can see the parts of the brain light up when they're having a positive interaction, with a trusted adult. You got to have positive interaction. So that's where, we're doing a lot of stuff. And where I'm really proud of the work we're doing. First is our police youth camp. So we started our first police youth camp in 2016. We bring kids in free of charge. The business community donates. And we do fun police stuff with the kids, but we also just go and do fun activities. We take them we have a boardwalk with rides here in Wildwood, which is about, 3 or 4 miles away. We had kids that lived in our community, never been to the Wildwood boardwalk, never been on the rides. And it's been there since, the 50s. There's a water park, never been to the water park. We take them zip lining at the park. We have a park and zoo here in Cape May County. We take them to the Coast Guard base. All Coast Guard recruits are trained in Cape May County for the whole United States of America. It's a big base. We take them down there, show them the boats, get them thinking about a career in the military. These are middle school kids. We developed curriculum with a partner, a nonprofit prevention and substance abuse agency called Cape Assist, to deliver life skills curriculum. Every day had a theme: decision making, peer pressure, and it was interwoven into the day's activities. And half the time, the kids didn't even know they were receiving the curriculum.
5-day camp, is that correct? 5-day camp.
5-day camp, and then they graduate at National Night Out, which that's the first Tuesday in August. We give certificates to kids. We recognize them. It's just a great event. And we collect data through our partner, Cape Assist. And the piece of data that I always talk about is from a couple years ago. 7% of kids out of 60 said before the camp they didn't have a trusted adult they could go to if they had a problem, but after the camp they did. And I said, you know what? 7% out of 60, I get excited about that because those are lives. Those are lives that we are changing forever. And then in with all the other stuff that we do on top of that, which I'll talk in a minute, we're having these positive interactions. We still stay connected with these kids in our community.
How do you select which kids how many kids do you take in for your camp? And then how do you select them? What's that process?
So the principals, vice principals at the school, they can recommend a kid and they automatically get in. They know that if there is a kid from challenging circumstances who would really benefit from the camp, they automatically get in. And we talk to all the principal and vice principal at that school, and they talk to the teachers. Once those group of kids are in, after that, we have a lottery system. Because we have some kids that have been to the camp a couple years, and then we're using them as mentors to mentor other kids, which also fits in with some of the work we're doing with the coalition that I talked about earlier. We have some Big Brother, we partner with Big Brothers Big Sisters, where we have high school kids mentoring middle school kids. We have middle school kids mentoring elementary school kids to try to have this positive interaction. So we kind of took the same model in our youth camp too. So that's how the kids get into our camp.
And how many kids roughly do you have in your camp?
So before COVID, 2019, we had 75.
Woo.
45 the first year. We had 60 the second year, 75 the third. Last year we couldn't do it because of COVID, but we did take ice cream trucks into different parts of the community and had like 3 or 4 hour events, socially distanced, to be able to stay connected with kids.
Cool. But that's huge. That's to have that many kids, have a curriculum, have all these activities planned for a week. Man, that's a tiring week, I bet. You're talking that way.
But you know what? The officers love it too. And that's the thing I didn't see coming with all this work that we did. And then we do a lot more other programs connecting cops with kids, is the impact it has on the officers. like to get them out of what that cycle I was just telling you about and create time in their job to interact with kids when there's not a problem, crisis, or emergency. Really, really special to see. So, that was nice. And the other thing with the grant, we were able to give grant funds to our camp, but then other police departments. So the first year at Cape May County, 2016, 45 kids for middle. One neighboring department had a 2-day camp with 30 kids. The following year, with grant funds, we had 300 kids in all Cape May County with the other departments that did what we did. They modeled what we did, and we were able to give grant funds to see it grow, which was nice to see.
That's huge. That's 75 kids, like in 2019, 75 kids that you have this amazing positive influence on, and you've created these relationships that now they feel, so many of them more feel that there's somebody, a trusting adult in their life that they have to go to. That's incredible, right? That's life-changing for the next 50 years.
Yep, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Carry on. What else you got happening there? I know you're doing some amazing things.
Yep. So we did the police youth camp. The next thing that we did is we increased our school-based programs. We only had one program in the 5th grade. It was called DARE, which you may have heard of.
Yep.
We switched to something called LEAD, Law Enforcement Against Drugs. Both good programs. I just felt LEAD was more evidence-based for me. I'm big on data and things along those lines. So we went from having one program in the 5th grade. We instituted a program in the 4th grade called Operation Prevention. The DEA has a program just about prescription drug safety. It's like 6 weeks. The officer would go into every classroom in the 4th grade, teach his curriculum. The curriculum was important, prescription drug safety, but it's also that positive interaction between a police officer and kids, starting in the 4th grade. Then you come back in the 5th grade, you have our traditional program we've had forever, LEAD. LEAD had a 7th grade program. It's another thing I liked about it. So we added another program in the 7th grade. And then in the 10th grade, we added a program called #NotEvenOnce, an opiate prevention program. And for me, the curriculum was important, but I love the idea of 4th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, 10th grade, not just a one-day program, but over the course of 6, 8, 10 weeks, these programs range. On a weekly basis, a police officer is coming into the classroom. You're having positive interaction with a police officer. That is something that I think is very valuable. So I was able to talk to Township Committee to not only invest in the police youth camp, but to invest in these other programs that I wanted to do. And that's the challenge, I think, for police chiefs. When I talk to them, I say, look, this is a smart business decision. At the end of the day, this is a fiscally responsible decision, because you know how much money you save on prevention? We lose that sometimes because you can't touch it, feel it. But when someone comes in contact with the criminal justice system, the costs are immense. I mean, it's really, really significant, and I believe we're reducing crime over the long term if we continue down this path. I think we have some, and I think it's only going to get better because of our action. So that school-based program was the next piece. We instituted another program, really wasn't school-based curriculum, but it was called Paws on Patrol, where once a quarter we would send officers into kindergarten and pre-K, and they would just play with the kids in uniform and get to know the kids. So that was something, it wasn't like a 6 or 8 week program, but they would go in quarterly and interact with the kids. So that's called our Paws on Patrol program. So in Middle Township schools, if your child goes through Middle Township schools, as long as I'm chief, they're going to meet our officers on Paws on Patrol in pre-K or kindergarten, then in the 4th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, 10th grade, throughout the whole program. Then we're going to have a police youth camp in the middle. So, those are some things we did with the school. In the middle school, we added another program. It went for about 6 weeks before COVID hit, where we did e-gaming with cops once a month in the middle school. They would stay after school. They would get a life skill lesson from Cape Assist for about 15 minutes. And then cops and kids would play video games, and then they would catch the activity bus back. Again, there's positive interactions between cops and kids. We were able to get some grant funds to help get the gaming equipment and things along those lines. So that's another thing we added. We did a trading card program where police officers got like baseball cards with their name in the picture. we went to the business community and said, will you donate items for a prize bag that if a kid meets 15 different Middle Township police officers, they can bring those cards into the station and they'll get a prize bag. So they get a $10 gift card to McDonald's, they get a little spinny thing, and then some tickets to a local arcade on the boardwalk. So that, I tell you, that really surprised me. We're on Facebook. We have a pretty big social media presence. And when we did that press release about the trading card program, we, within 24 hours, it was something like 27,000 views.
What? 27,000 views?
Yeah, it was one of our most successful Facebook posts ever. I mean, usually we're around 5,000 for a view. We do a press release on something. If it's something very significant that gets the attention of a lot of community, we get up to 15 or 20. This was 27,000. It was insane. So I was really surprised. I thought it would be received well, but I had no idea how well it was going to be received. We had kids chasing cops all over town trying to get those cards. It was really cool. And we still have it. COVID kind of has changed everything, but we're going to get back to it. So the officers would have the cards on them, and when they're having a chat with the kiddo, then they give them the card for them to collect. That's how it worked, right? That's how it worked, yeah. And I think one of the reasons why I was so positive is I think for a citizen to initiate an interaction with a police officer sometimes, and because I'm a police officer, I've never thought about it for this perspective, maybe a little intimidating just to go up to a police officer. And I think this gave an excuse for like the parent and the kids to like say, hey, officer, how you doing? We saw the trading card, and boom, we were off to the races. So, it was a really good thing to kind of help break down maybe those barriers and give people an excuse to interact with one another a little bit more. So that we did that program, which is pretty successful. And then look, I've been telling the officers, just towards your normal regular duties, get out of the car and play with kids and interact with kids. And, just from our social media, you can go through and see residents posting pictures of our officers in the community when they're on regular patrol. So, it's again, not just for those special times, but it's part of a comprehensive plan towards a goal, right? It's towards a goal of all about reducing trauma, building resiliency to make a difference in people's lives, but to also make our community safer. So that's kind of the general, I guess, overview of the things that we've been doing here in Middle Township.
And your officers, in addition to the programs that you have through your police force, then some of the officers as well extend their time personally as well to coach baseball or those kind of things as well, correct?
Yeah, so our officers, there's a police officers association, which each officer contributes $5 out of their pay. They do a toy drive to touch over 75 families that they volunteer their time for, a Thanksgiving giveaway. A lot of our officers are coaching in the community, in sports teams, volunteering their time. There's a boxing academy going on right now that's been attracting a lot of kids. Person's very passionate down there. He's a school teacher, opened it up. Some officers have been down there. We're looking to do some things with him. So yeah, our officers are giving back to the community outside of their own time, which is really nice to see. You just finished your term as president of the New Jersey Police Chiefs Association, right? That was last year you finished that term? Yep, I finished the term and had it during COVID.
Yeah.
I made it my number one priority for addressing adverse childhood experiences. And then COVID hit, and it was, we all know what happened. But our Handle with Care program, the Attorney General instituted it statewide. So I am proud that during my tenure we were able to get that done. So every police department now, over 400 in the state, have the Handle with Care program.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And have you other departments also picked up some of your other initiatives that you got going on? Have you seen others adopt those as well?
Yeah, the police youth camp has started to grow. Handle with Care, obviously, there were departments doing it, but then the Attorney General mandated it. And some of the other stuff about the trauma responsive policing policy, some departments have adopted that, that, is a little bit more of a forward-thinking, progressive policy that, has not been adopted, like the Handle with Care and Police Youth Camp. But I do believe it will be more in the future. And there's definitely been a shift where I think more people are open.
Yeah, that's amazing. When you were a kiddo there, Chris, who were the important adults, the caring adults in your life? Mom and dad, or just mom and dad?
Oh no, mom and dad. My dad was a school teacher. I'm very fortunate. My parents, but I played baseball a lot, and the coaches and the people that I interacted with, playing baseball had a huge impact on my life. And as I've gotten older, I realized my dad would go to other people and tell them to talk to me. Understanding, to a certain point, maybe I would, tune him out a little bit, and he was trying to, create the conditions to, especially people I looked up to impact me. And that's the one thing, when we all look at where we are today, it's because of other people. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And then being in this job, people that have, some of my supervisors and my previous chief, and, and I think that's the one, how we talked about it earlier, the power of us as adults, whether it be a teacher, a coach, a police chief, whatever we're doing, the power to see things in people that they don't see in themselves is just, really powerful. And I don't think we realize that when we're interacting with kids.
Yeah. And that's like, the more caring adults that you and I and our colleagues can attract to bring in to say, hey, make a difference in this kid's life. It doesn't take a whole bunch, right? Just a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of time, a little bit of attention, huge impact for that child, right? And you said your officers, that it was a very gratifying for them as well, right? And it is, you help a kid and you can see that they light up and they're excited about it. And then, that obviously makes you feel good, right? That you're able to just with that little bit of time and attention, make a difference in that little person's life, right? So I think it's super important.
Yep.
Yeah. When you're talking about sports, when I was a kid, I played hockey. And then I had a coach, and his name was Maurice Lanoux, Mo Lanoux, they called him. Mo wouldn't have been a good popular name now, but they guess it was okay. But anyways, he was a coach, and so he'd go and take you out and teach you about how playing together, and teach you sportsmanship, and teach you about what happens when you lose and what happens when you win, and how you're gracious in both, kind of a thing. And years after, I don't know, 25 years after, I wrote him a letter, and I just basically said, hey, Coach Lanoux, you may not remember me. You taught me hockey. Obviously, I'm not in the NHL. You would have remembered that. But, I just wanted to let you know I do appreciate the lessons you taught me and the time you spent. Because now as an adult, I was doing the same thing, coaching people, right? And I'm thinking, okay, he made a difference in my life. I'm making a difference in these kids' lives, right? Most of what I was doing was more, what I am doing is teaching firearm safety to little people, and have them, a lot of them have their first shooting experience with first safe use of a firearm experience. And I feel that firearms are a great tool to teach responsibility and to teach the connection between your action and a consequence. Here's what happens. And in the case of a firearm, it's like milliseconds between that, when that consequence happens. So anyways, this letter that I wrote 10 years later, his son, Maurice Lanoux's son, calls me up and says, hey, my dad died. I said, oh, sorry to hear that. And he says, yeah, I just want to tell you, in his bureau of all his most important papers was your letter acknowledging him as a coach when you were young. And I thought, all right, that was, that meant something to him, for him to keep that piece of paper, right? So
that's very nice. Yep.
Yeah.
Great example of the power. Yep.
Yes, exactly. So, all right. Well, you are doing amazing things, man. That would be, if we could just take that and duplicate it everywhere, our communities, our society, our world would change in a pretty big damn hurry, I would say. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm lucky. I have good people, and my officers are very fortunate. The work they're doing and buying into the direction we're going. And a lot of these ideas have come. The police youth camp was not my idea. I told the officers, look, I want ideas. I want, how can we connect? And the camp director, it was his idea, so very, very fortunate. The trading card idea was another officer's idea, not my idea. They knew the direction we wanted to go. So
yes,
people helped me along the way. And
that trading card idea, where you had such phenomenal success with it, but that was like a very inexpensive program that had a huge reach. Eh? Wow.
Yep.
Incredible. Something else. Oh, yes. When you were saying about in 2016, when you first basically learned about ACEs and the light bulb went on, you said, oh my goodness, right? I had a similar experience. For 25 years, I've been the secretary treasurer for a victim services unit. And back in the day, the type of situations we'd have, the worst thing we'd have is a notification next to kin, right? And so that would, you know how it works. And that would be kind of the worst scenario that our victim services unit would be involved in. And like 2 years ago, the coordinator for our unit, her name's Adonis, she was sharing with me some of the stats, which I haven't been paying attention to. I was paying attention to writing the bill, writing the checks and getting the money, not really what we're doing, right? And then look at the stats. Number 1, child sexual assault. Number 2, child assault. And I was just like floored. I could not believe it. And then that led me on to a whole research on adverse childhood experiences, back to the report from 1998 and all of the all of the direct linkages between all of the terrible things that can happen in a person's life and the number of ACEs scores that they've had that have been unchecked, right, or unsupported, right, and they haven't had the other adult supports to help them kind of move forward with their life and give them reason for hope that there's caring adults there that want to make a difference in their life, right? So yeah, it was a big eye opener for me. I just like, what? I could not believe it.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yes. Okay. What else do we have to talk about? What are you studying now?
What am I studying now? Just focused on the work that we're doing. I want to get back to normal here. This police youth camp, I want to make sure we get back to. CDC just released some guidelines, so we've been diving into them. We're slowly starting to institute our programs. For me, my focus is I don't want COVID to destroy the work that we did. We got to get back to what we were doing.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that? So we still have, some new cases here in New Jersey. The governor just opened up the vaccine to everyone 16 and older about a week ago. So we're hoping we're going to see a significant shift and a reduction in cases. But for me, how do I manage this transition period? Our youth camp is not going to be 75. I know that. I just know that by looking at the guidelines. It's not going to happen.
No, it can't happen.
What's our number going to be? How are we going to do it safely? How are we going to get back to this? Right now, schools are just half days. They were in hybrid. So the handle with care, the connections there. So that's where a lot of my focus is now, making sure that on the other side of COVID, we don't miss a beat. We pick up right where we left off.
Yeah, no, it's real important for sure. Because all of the work you've done, all of the momentum you have, you certainly don't want that to be derailed from COVID, because it's important work that, man, if you think about if we get good at reducing adverse childhood experiences and mitigating the impacts of them, right, reducing that toxic load kind of a thing, just the changes in the composition of our communities in terms of people who are healthier, who have better relationships, who have just life better. They learn easier, right? All of those things that are related to getting effective, either eliminating adverse childhood experiences or finding a way to manage and move past adverse childhood experiences, right? Are you familiar with Bruce Perry's book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that book. And that's kind of like, for me, it's a book of terrible tragedy that these kids had to endure, but huge hope that with the right interventions, these kids, had good lives in the end, right? That's amazing to me, that thing. So we saw a video. Bruce
Perry did a video with the California Attorney General on domestic violence about the effects of trauma and, how we think about brain development in those first 3 years of lives, how important that is and how the brain is a sponge. Really great video that we've shared with all the officers. And I think is really important. And this COVID, you think about when COVID hit, we did an absolute 180. We went from trying to have up close personal interactions on a regular basis to don't talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
We were changing all our policies. We were, trying to really mitigate contact between officers and citizens and anybody, unless there was an emergency. So, we've got to turn that back now,
Definitely.
We did do a video where officers were reading children books. And then we were putting it on Facebook and social media and sending to the schools, things along those lines. But, we just started, I want to say about a month and a half, 2 months ago, start to transition back to our normal operations. And we're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction.
That's great. The reason I was asking what you're studying now, I probably spend 20 hours a week studying adverse childhood experiences and ways to reduce violence and those kind of things. But the one thing that I just learned recently that I hadn't heard before, but it makes so much sense, is the man box. Have you heard of this man box idea before?
No, I haven't.
You and I, when we grew up, maybe me different than you because you're younger than me, but I was told, in essence, from my parents and from my peers and the people in my life, what it meant to be a man. And what it meant to be a man was you had to be tough, you never ask for help, you don't show pain, you never cry, right? These are things to be a man you got to do. And then to our detriment, then that makes us that really taints and damages our relationship with women as well. Because to be a man, then what's the biggest insult you can do is you say, hey, don't do that like a girl. You're like, what a pussy, what a wuss, right? That kind of a thing. So then that further creates that separation between kind of like men and women and a different power dynamic that says men are always strong and powerful and blah, blah, blah. And women are not. They're less than somehow. So anyways, this whole man box thing, for me, it's like, oh, that makes sense. I get that. I understand where, that would have some unhealthy consequences. So anyways, I'm studying that because there's actually a program, it's called A Call to Men, where you can kind of take a course to teach it, to share it to boys, to kind of say, hey, like, you might have been taught this, or let's have the conversation. Here's the box that men aren't. What are the things that you would do to describe men, right? And even the same thing with, over time, G.I. Joe action figures, used to have skinny little biceps like this. G.I. Joe today has these like huge guns that don't exist in the world, right? So it's also an expectation thing, right? Like this is, it's really,
sounds interesting.
Yeah. So anyways, that's something I've been learning that I've been really enjoying.
Good, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Back to Bruce Perry for a minute. I was in a course with him 2 weeks ago that he was teaching with Shelley Spearchief and Moses Spearchief. And it was called The Neurosequential Model and the Wisdom of the Elders. And in essence, I realize you don't have a big First Nations component to your population there, but we do. We're on the ancestral home of the Blackfoot people, and that's why I actually opened the show with Oki. That's a Blackfoot greeting that we use here quite often. But basically, his thing is that the traditional indigenous ways to raise kids, where there's like 4 caring adults like per child, right? And the perception was the child is perfect when they come into the world. You know how Maslow's hierarchy, the top is self-actualized. The kid, when they're born, is self-actualized, and the rest of the tribe's job is just to kind of give them the experiences to kind of realize or make that self-actualization known. Anyways, beautiful concept, beautiful kind of thing. But it's all about, from his perspective, as you know, about more informal or more adult supports, more informal, could be informal supports or formal, but mostly informal, right? Caring adults in a life, one, can make a huge difference in a child's life, right? So,
yeah, so true.
Yes. Chief Lusner, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. I think we'll call her good for now. You're getting late there. It's like you're coming to 10 o'clock, I think, right?
10 o'clock, yep.
Yeah, that's just about past my bedtime. So, okay. See ya. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thank you.